What's going on, everybody? So glad that you're joining me for another Scalable Call Center Sales podcast. Very excited for this one. This one's going to be fun. I know I say that every single time, but I'm always excited. I think it's great. So I have Steve Biederman, and he is a published author, accomplished leader, highly regarded contact center industry innovator. He is the president and CEO of Noble Biz, which is a contact center technology company. They do a lot of things, focus on state-of-the-art solutions. His background is amazing. This is more of a tactical educational podcast where I want to help everyone improve, but check out a lot of his content that he has out there with his journey. Literally, we almost didn't hit record because we got sidetracked on lots of different things in life and lessons. So check that out. Also, Noble Biz has its own podcast, so make sure to check that one out too. It's called First Contact: Stories of the Call Center, which I highly recommend. Steve's been on there many times, not hosted by him, but he's been on there. Steve, welcome to the Scalable Call Center Sales Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. I look forward to it. This happens to be sort of a sweet spot for me in terms of how do you scale a business because in my own career, I've always been hyper aggressive. And so I don't live within the world of maintenance management. It's more how do I keep going, and going often means bigger. So maybe I can help some contact centers with that.
What do you think is, let's just start there. One of the challenges with trying to scale, especially in the contact center, and contact center being, in this realm, let's say sales in particular, but any telephone inside sales of any size, somebody's trying to scale to the next level. What have you found from your experience that gets in the way or people resist?
Well, one of the things that gets in the way is the cost and investing ahead of time for what you may plan to do. It either gets in the way in terms of not wanting that cost until you're sure you can turn an ROI on it, or being willing to invest and not knowing when to stop investing when you've overdone it and the ROI isn't there. So it comes from two different areas. But um, I would tell you this, that scaling a business it's a plan and it's a model, especially a contact center, because there are so many relational issues and moving parts. But at the same time, there is an iterative factor to it. So my advice is always the same, which is build a plan. Project yourself as I'm this side. I'm 50 agents. I'm now 200 agents. What do I look like? What do I feel like? How do I manage that? What's the process and infrastructure I need? And what am I at 500 and 1,000 agents? What do I look like? What am I with hard sites versus virtual or a hybrid? In other words, go through the process and build a model. Now, recognize that I call that model the back pocket model. That's like in the worst case, if nobody else has any better ideas, I can pull that out and do something with that, right? But don't get stuck in that, because business is, we were talking earlier about living life on life's terms, and just keep taking steps forward, and often those steps are not what you were anticipating. So you've done thinking, that's great. You have some structure to that thinking. You know why you want to do it and the way you want to do it. You may be a process driven manager or a gamification thinker. You might prefer virtual to hard site type of thinking, but at the same time, go with it. Um, and I know I'm running on here, but I have a client today who was a business that takes on brands, and they take short projects and they connect remote agents with the different brands, and the brands are looking for short-term agents, kind of like an Uber agent model. But during the pandemic, he was getting kind of hurt like everybody else was, and a new project came up from the government to do some PPE work. But it was from I think, the state of New York, in fact, and it was a huge project, completely off his model, nothing to do with it, except he did understand how to get agents, and he did understand that his software that he used applied to it. But there was a lot of other stuff. Well, the question he asked me was, do I go with this or do I stick with my model? And the answer was, look, can you survive until you can get back to your model if you just stick to your model? He said, I don't think I can. I said, well, then can you thrive if you do this? He said, yeah, but I might do this and never get back to my model. I said, well, one is living and one is dying. So I choose the one that's living, and I know you haven't planned for that, but maybe you want to do it. And that's
Yeah.
what he did.
And with that, right? So if it's a change in the model and it works and it's successful, then maybe that becomes the new model, right? Instead of being
Exactly. And
attached
today
to,
it is.
yeah,
That's his
that's
model.
great.
Yeah.
Well, and I love your back of the pocket kind of calculation and figures, especially what you said just in passing, which is sometimes what keeps people from wanting to scale or being effective at it is where they're over investing and they're buying too many tools or spending too much money or thinking they need either the latest tech or a bigger office or this and that, and then can get them in trouble because then they're slipping away from that profitability and they think scaling is the issue, and the challenge is it's just over developing, right, all the
You
tools in the
know,
toolbox.
I've had the opportunity to build larger organizations and or from small to large. And as you start to get larger and the pressures hit everybody, not just me, but everybody in the business, so all the other managers, there's a tendency, because nobody has had this experience of
Mm-hmm.
really a crazy growth, for an example, the solution most of the time comes to, let's add more people. Let's just add more. You know, people solve the problem. People are the solution. And the truth is that yes, people are a part of a solution, but to what degree are they? Because when you bring in people, you bring in management, you bring in pressure on your processes, you bring in payroll, and all of that mitigates the margins and the ROI that every business requires. So, but it's the easiest answer, and it's actually the fastest answer. Or alternatively, I could be the kind of business manager or owner that essentially says, no, I didn't plan to add anybody in 2021, so I'm not going to, and see decay. And that's why I say you have to put your plans in the back pocket and not get so hardened to them that you're not
Mm-hmm.
listening and hearing and being reasonable and pragmatic. Um, I, I just see that we all get so stuck in the idea of what we think should be happening that we fail to live with what is happening. And I've seen businesses fail, and especially contact centers, because a contact center has to be so heavily invested in technology, like mine. They have to be sign contracts for things like carrier that are ongoing. They have to hire large groups of people, and it's not always easy to hire. So their tendency is to want to keep those people, and all of those are major investments for them. And once they make that choice, they're there. And they forgot that the main rule of being a manager is we're paid actually for the most simple thing, which is make decisions. And that means that it allows me the privilege of making a decision today and it being wrong, and tomorrow being able to change that and make a different decision. But if I build all these hard and fast, less than agile things into my business, I am stuck. And you darn well better recognize after the pandemic that you better not be so stuck that you can't be flexible.
Yeah. And it's interesting because stuck on both sides, right? The stuck on not hiring anybody because that's not in the plan, or
Yeah.
that's not what we're doing, or stuck in the solution for this is always to hire more people or spend more on marketing, which I
Yeah.
also see people get in trouble with, because if they don't fix the processes, the company culture, the systems, have things in place that actually are getting a successful result out of either the
Right.
people or the marketing, then what happens is they're just trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it, but they're stuck in that routine. And I remember my first time I was a VP of operations. I wasn't even a VP of sales. And the VP of sales at the time, the CEO founder, went to him and said, well, we need to double our sales. And he said, well, double the marketing. And the founder's like, who was bootstrapping it, said, no, your closing rate is terrible. We need better closing rate. And he said, no, you just need to double the marketing. And so he got fired. And then I went over there, and then we worked on fixing the process, because that VP of sales was like, well, just spend more. That's how you win.
You just keep filling up the pipeline with more. It doesn't matter what your closing percentage is. But in a way, that's what happens in contact centers sometimes, where they just they need more revenue. They add more agents, right? An agent gives me this. They may consider the fact that they need to improve the sales techniques of the person selling, but oftentimes that's a much harder and slower win than just add more salespeople. If I get 20 more salespeople, I know my ROI is this. Next thing you know, you're like this.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, though, as the title of this is about helping people think about how to scale, there are some basic pieces, that I think are important to recognize. In the moment that we're in, because of the cloud, it allows a contact center the ability to buy technology, whether it's the communications tools like Omni Plus or other tools like CRMs or ordering systems. It'll whatever survey systems, whatever those are, it allows you to be able to cut less than long-term deals. So, in other words, think about what I said earlier. You have this company, this contact center that is really an Uber agent. They're providing Uber agents for brands, right? How flexible is that, right? I mean, to some degree, he's able to eliminate this heavy hard cost of agents by being able to find a legitimate way to train agents in a short term. So he has a good training approach or software. And outside of certain pieces, he keeps his overhead down and he keeps himself agile because he's in the cloud and he knows that he can come to a company like me and he doesn't need a 3-year contract. He didn't need to buy an on-premise system. He can now communicate any way he wants, only when he needs to, and he spends the money to the dollar that he's bringing in, give or take. And in his case, agents are the same thing. He scaled up to over 1,000 agents before,
Wow.
and I've seen him down to 75 agents, and he's able to do that without carrying the major overhead. Now there is overhead, but it's less expensive overhead. It's training software overhead, right? So it's the real key is how do I get an agent trained to begin to work this campaign as quick as I can? Well, come on, BPOs are doing that all the time anyway, right? Service centers, they're getting tons of new campaigns and they're doing short-term training and they're just taking the same agent and flexing them into different campaigns. Well, that's not what he's doing. He's just taking agents and trusting his training approach, testing approach, and that's a heck of a lot less expensive. But nonetheless, a basic premise is you have to add technology, and you have to do it up front to the degree that you know what your technology is, you know how to train to it, you know how to manage from it, you need to know how the reporting works, and so you really need to understand the full dynamic of what are you selling. You're selling the combination of what you do with the use of the technology that you have, and then you really want to think about, am I a person that really feels like I should have a hard site or not? And if I have a hard site, okay, but where? Do I have it in country? Do I have it out of country? Do I have it rural? Do I have it in an economic zone that allows me some, privileges that kind of reduce my expenses? But my strongest recommendation is whatever you do in this day and age, don't make long, be committed to what you believe in, but don't make long-term commitments to the technology, to the carrier, to, I hate to say it, to all you agents, but to the agents. And
Yeah.
be careful about what you do, but be capable of feeling confident enough that you can go from 75 to 1,000 per se, or to 200, and play it out in your mind, game it ahead of time. How do you do that?
Yeah. And as you're talking about that, especially, the commitment, the long-term commitment, which like the cloud software, virtual agents, this virtual world, thanks to the pandemic, kind of dispersing everybody and seeing how well that can actually work versus what's never been trusted in the contact center
Well,
world, right?
why?
Which is
We,
people
we
being
don't
home.
trust it because we say, well, maybe you'll hear the wash machine in the background.
Sure.
Maybe the internet connection isn't right.
Or maybe they won't be working, or who knows what they'll
Right.
be doing, right?
But
Yeah.
but the truth is, you can manage that. Let me tell you, our company at NobleBiz, what we did. We had at the time of the pandemic, you had 400 people, of which 250 we had to move virtual immediately. Like in we like from one day to the next, we had to go from being in our world office to being at home. Did we say, well, no, we're worried about them not working? No, we didn't do that. We said,
Right.
what innovatively can we do that's affordable, because our revenue could drop too. So we also had to manage costs. And we just used tools that were available. What we did is we took every team and we set up Zoom rooms. And we just had open, they were all on Zoom. Everybody was there available, talking to each other throughout the day. And what we found, we didn't expect this, but what we found is we were actually more intimate with our groups, being more hands on than we ever were when we were just in our office. And here's the thing, right now, I'm looking at you face to face, eyes to eyes. When
Right.
we're in an office, we don't do that, right? We're
Yeah.
walking past each other. Hey, how's it going? Whatever, we're hiding out in a way. We've learned how to carve people out, right? And wear blinders. But when you're on a video, you don't get that privilege. And so you get closer to somebody.
Well, and I think also what I saw watching it with so many clients and just companies in general is that going virtual and the pandemic, it's a shared experience. And when it's a shared experience, everyone figures out a way, buckles down, and then looks out for each other and wants to make the most of it, right? Like I come from California, so I've been through many earthquakes
Right.
where like that happens, neighborhood comes together, everyone is really close for a while. Any natural disaster, anything that happened, like you think of 9/11, right? Like as a
Right.
country, everyone came together. This presented an opportunity where the whole world was in a shared experience. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting how that, bust through. And as you're talking about these things, the line that I always try to remind companies and all the employees of the company is you want to marry the vision and date the strategy. So you want to know where you're going and you want to know what you want to create and what the impact is. But the strategy, how you do it, what the script is like, what the technology is like, where, if we're in the office or not, that everyone has to understand. Like you're playing the field with that. Like that's going to adjust over time. You're
That's
married to the
how.
vision, but you're going to date the whatever that falls underneath that.
But what can't change is your culture,
Correct.
and your intention.
Yeah.
And that's a really important piece to understand. And so, how do you hold people accountable when I have 10 employees versus 400 employees, how do I make sure that the same intention and culture is evident when I have those 400 that we had as 10 kumbaya, you know?
Yeah.
And that becomes the thing that you think about. Don't wait till it happens to think about. If you want to be a 400 seater, then you need to think about it when you're a 10 seater. Because if you don't, what will break down are your processes. My approach to how I manage, to how I implement, to how I audit, to how I train. It's almost like what you have to do is take, and what's more practical, you probably take a 30 seat situation, and at that point you build the same processes that you think would be agile, always agile processes, but build them the same way that you think will make sense when you're 400 people or more.
Yeah.
And then just begin to add, as you add people, you don't have to change your approach to how you manage them. Now, from don't build processes though when you're scaling that are so hard and fast that you can't change them. Recognize that we start with a process and we begin to manage to it, and we hold each other accountable to the reason you have a process is to have a tool to manage to. But recognize that usually when we first build a process, it's the most cumbersome of all. You're trying to think of every little thing that could go wrong and you're adding it into your process. And at certain times, processes don't work. And you'll see that in your contact center when agents begin to do different things from what the process is intended to do. And what that usually means, with the assumption that your managers are trying to manage to it, is not that the agents are wrong, but that the process is wrong and the process is broken. So don't just throw it out and say the agents start to do what they want. Instead, this is your opportunity for change management, and have a process for how do I handle change management. And then with the long-term goal that by the time you get to those 400 agents, that cumbersome process, it's sleek, it's elegant, and it's simpler. So don't keep adding. As you get bigger, the process shouldn't get bigger, it should actually get smaller.
Yeah, and that's so important because what I know that we've both seen is where small contact sales, telephone sales teams, 5, 10 people, they're getting by on just being a family and
Right.
trusting that everyone's doing what they should be doing. And then as you scale up, what happens is you just put more people in there and then you can't manage it. Nobody's keeping track of it. And then the scale, when things start slipping, the scale just gets even more painful and more difficult. So,
Yeah,
and I
and
love the fact that you said
fail.
too, like as you get bigger, the process should get less. I mean, you should have a lot of processes in place to keep everyone going the same direction. And then as you get bigger, they should get less because now there's critical mass of people knowing what they should be doing with some
Exactly.
guides.
Yeah, it actually, in many ways, is much easier to manage a larger organization in terms of the fundamentals. The harder part is sometimes getting that larger organization to, or the third and fourth and fifth generation employees to understand the culture. And that
Mm,
requires the leadership to live that culture and
yeah.
uh, to constantly talk it, to preach it, to explain why that's. It isn't just saying, like here at our company, we're promise keepers. That's really our entire core value. We make a promise and we keep it. But that sounds like just a little tagline. But what we do internally is we're constantly talking to each other about what does that mean? Why is that important to us? What's the value proposition in being a promise keeper? And how do you do it? So then what we do is we build our processes and our approach and decisions. We always have one last thing we do before we take it and make it real. And that is, does that meet our core value? Will that help us be a promise keeper? And if it doesn't, it sounded good, but no, sorry, can't do it. And by living in the world of your core value and matching everything off it, you can go from 10 agents to 500 agents, and they can buy into it too. a lot of business people think there's two parts, there's the two faces of that leader. And one is the leader that is out there with his people, and the one that really sits in the back room and says, this really is hard. And people don't get it out there, and I have to make these difficult decisions, and a little resentment comes up about those people out there, and that's a different person.
Yeah.
That's the problem. If you want to scale your business up, especially in contact centers where it's so people connected and customer connected, you darn well better be the same person when your door is closed than when your door is open. Now, I'll tell you that uh, that was a hard lesson for myself to learn as I was growing business younger. But over time, you just get very clear that there are not the two faces of Steve. There's just Steve. And this is who I am all the time. Always be in management mode. That's the other thing I would say about scaling any business, which is your job is my job is to be in management mode. My people need me to be in management mode. And
Versus what? What's the other option?
versus what I would call Steve mode. So how do I do that? How do I become that informal guy that can play ping pong while still being in management mode? It's because I can be the same person all the time. I don't think that I have a split character. I am just who I am. Sometimes it feels right to do this, and sometimes it feels right to do that. But my core values, my approach, and my meaning and intention is always the same. And that's often a conflict with managers that become leaders, who all of a sudden they become leaders and they go, I feel kind of like a fraud. What am I doing being the leader? I was just this guy living on a park bench, and now look at me. I'm a leader, and they start to think that, well, they're different. They have to act different in different situations. But we're not actors making different movies. We're just the same person all the time, believing what we need to believe in, and being honest with people. And I think that's how you keep agents too. You're straightforward with them. This is
And
what we
and
do.
that's such a great lesson because I've seen that many times, successful and not successful, but it's that authenticity and transparency, which is you get what you get, you know what you're going to get, and it's the same person all
Yeah,
the time.
yeah,
That's what I've always aspired to be, management mode, but also just me being me in any scenario. It doesn't matter who I'm talking to, from let's say a CEO to a customer that's trying to enroll. I'm just me, and it's just who I
yeah.
am. And it generally works. Doesn't always work, but it's just easier than doing that
Well, but we don't, as
outside.
human beings, always work, right? I
No,
mean, and
no,
my operation doesn't always work. And I
right.
was on a call today with my team, and we're having a real struggle with an implementation right now. Uh, doesn't always work, but our
Yep.
intention is the same. So we go back and work it. One last thing I've learned in my life about scaling a business, because I got blindsided by this. I started small with two people and became a large business. And there was a point in time where I could see everything seemed to be working. And almost that I became unnecessary. And I didn't know it. The way I knew I was unnecessary was that my managers were telling me I was unnecessary. You don't really need to come to this, Steve. You don't need to do
Huh.
that. It's kind of like, you're not invited. You're not invited, but you're not invited. And so I was really faced a moment in time where I didn't know what am I supposed to do. And I started to look up, and I just started going onto my Google engine and saying, what does a CEO do? For
Yeah.
what's my job? And and I had to then convince myself that I didn't already do all those things I read. If I did, I wouldn't be sitting here with nothing to do except looking on my search engine. So it took me a long time to really understand what my job required. That because my job, in other than me thinking it was the most important job in the company, became the least important in many ways. So how do I add value? And my suggestion, so you don't run into that at the point that you have a big operation, is you begin at the beginning. And just like you build your processes to be big when you're smaller, you build yourself to be big when you're not so big. And you in other words, you plan it. You plan, what am I going to be like? What do I do when I have this many people? What do I do? What do I do? And model it, put it in your back pocket, full circle here, back pocket,
There you go.
and then live your life with people and go back to it when you need it.
I love it. I think that's great. So I want to ask you something on a tactical kind of, practical situation. So one of the big things, it's been a trend for a few years. However, there's still a lot of people who fight it. And I feel like it's a hot topic depending on who you talk to and something avoided by others, which is omni-channel approach. If we're talking about sales in particular, it's this various ways, if people aren't familiar, that somebody can reach out or get in touch with the call center, contact center, the sales team, right? So the classic was just the phone, but now it's maybe chat, it's SMS, maybe an online form, as all these different things. And so omni-channel is great because you're theoretically meeting the prospective customer where they want to be met with. But then there's the challenge, which you and I talked about before, which is how do you manage that from an agent standpoint, where now they have to be like amazingly talented at using these tools and then converting people to move forward with these tools. What are you seeing, and/or what are you, telling your clients to be mindful of?
Well, we get to see it every day because we manufacture and sell Omni Plus, which is our version of an Omni communications tool, for contact centers. So we haven't had really many clients that already are using an Omni channel that now convert to our Omni channel. That's not what we're seeing. We're mainly seeing people that are doing voice. They have their voice tools, or maybe a chat with it or something, and or multi-channel where they're segregated medias. And we're seeing them say, okay, I want omni-channel. Well, here's the key. The, you want to start out with that person and ask them why they need it. Why do they think they need it? What is their business plan that suggests they need that? And have they thought through how they're going to use their agents? And some are not agents, some might be virtual agent or using AI. So how are you going to do it? And oftentimes they'll say, well, I don't really know. I just want to start. I want to have it. So when I get a campaign, I can say it. And there are many people that say, I want it for my RFP checkbox so I can check that I have Omni, I have Omni capabilities. I don't really know. The campaign will come to me and then I'll figure out how to use it. And
Yeah.
we implement those. What we try to say though is when you do it that way and you don't exactly know why or how, but you want it available, that's great. It's easy enough to do, but let us work with you. When you get your first campaign that you think you need to use more than a narrow group of channels, let's work with you and let us share with you what other customers have done so that you can optimize it. And so one of the things is this: when you have Omni, I can really speak to just mine. So when you have Omni Plus, it is simple. First of all, it's not, oh my gosh, how do I figure all that out? It's as easy as the voice call. A voice call, an agent's got their headset, they're looking at their screen, and they get a screen pop and they start talking and reading their script or not, or looking at their CRM if they're integrated to it, or order form. When and they're looking at that simple screen. But think about it this way: that same screen on the side of it just has different channels. So it's a voice channel, it's a chat channel, it's a WhatsApp channel, it's a Facebook channel. You name the type of social channel, it's a video channel, whatever it may be, and it's just a click. So it's as easy as when they answered the phone on a voice. However that comes in, whether it's video or WhatsApp or anything, it's the same way they answer the call. They just have that channel pop. Now, if that agent wants to accommodate the person they're talking to, and that person says, I would really be more comfortable just doing voice to voice. Or they might not say it that way, but that's really the outcome. Then it's simple. Say not a problem, and you switch. You just click that, and you switch to that. And you may need their phone number, you may not, depending on what it is. You just within the context of that conversation continuing, you can just switch to different channels. So it allows a contact center not just to take on a new campaign that is asking for that, but it allows you the ability to say, imagine me if I'm a contact center that can give the privilege of choice of how we do communication and leave it to the person I'm reaching out to or is reaching out to me, so that it doesn't matter. Because to me, all of that information that's gathered by the end of the conversation is all in the same place. That's the key to it being wrapped together, not just the ability to switch channels, but to report on it and to view it. So it's that easy to do. So what you end up seeing a contact center is saying, I didn't know is this easy. My gosh, it's really no different in many ways. So in that sense, that means that I can now be creative in my business. I don't have to just be a checkbox. I can become really good at driving this sports car. It's not really much different than driving my old Volkswagen, and but it gives you this incredible flexibility. And the truth is this, it doesn't cost you any more. I mean, like for us, it's the same price. It doesn't matter. You're buying from us at the same price as anybody else's multimedia or voice only. You're not paying more for those different channels because you don't need to anymore. That's the beauty of where technology has gone, and the bandwidths that are available, and storage that we have the capability to do. So there are a lot of strategies. I like to connect our customers with our customers so that they get to communicate amongst each other and say, what are you doing? How are you doing it? What kind of campaigns are you now going out for? Used to be that contact centers said they were outbound centers or inbound centers. You don't have to do that today. Or blended centers. Now you can truly be not just blended in outbound and inbound, but blended in how you choose to communicate. You want to switch right now with me to a different channel? I can switch with you right now, and
Right.
we're on a different channel, and we never hung up from each other.
Yeah. That's
Beautiful.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's the power of the cloud technology, not being married to something, the flexibility that comes with just any of these solutions.
Yeah.
But then, being able to do it. And then that balance, right? Tying it back to what we kind of started talking about in the very beginning of the podcast, which is also being careful not to overdevelop and overspend, right? It's like I need to have these things. I need to go and buy every tool I can from the hardware store and fill up my garage before I have a project so that I'm ready,
Right.
versus
Buy
like,
a
okay, I have a
system.
project now, let me start getting the right tools.
I think it's really important today to not think it's so complicated that you have to spend a lot of money. Those things seem to go together. It's complicated and must cost a lot. Recognize that the cost today, it's way, way, way different than it was
Yeah,
15 years ago or 20 years ago with on-premise systems. It's less today, okay?
and way
And
simpler.
and simpler, and it doesn't cost more to have more channels. It does not cost more, and don't let any customer teach you that, or company tell you that. I compete in a world where there's over 200 companies that provide dialers and calling technology for contact centers. Not all of them are Omni plus like we are, but on different levels, there's a lot of choices out there. And remember that if you're a contact center, that don't overpay. Okay, yes, pay for something that works. Know that if it seems complicated, you might be making a poor choice. And then, stick with a company then, not because they have all these channels, but because they really care about you and will support you the way they be promise keepers.
I love it. That's a perfect place to stop. Steve, thanks for coming on the podcast. I know the best place for the company site is noblebiz with a z.com. I know that
Yep.
you put out a lot of content. I know you're on lots of podcasts. Anything in particular where they can find you or the company outside the business website that
Well,
you like these
certainly
days?
LinkedIn. I'm at steve.biederman, BEDERMAN, at noblebiz.com. Or, find me, I think I'm Steve Michael Biederman. My middle name somehow got into LinkedIn years ago, when they first started that. Many people say, "Hi, Michael," and I keep wondering why they're talking to my brother. But LinkedIn is a really good place too. So email me, do that. And just for whoever cares and is interested enough, I like to leave my mobile with everybody at 720-301-5325. And listen, reach me. I'm happy to connect you with our great team of people, and we're happy to just share what we can with you.
That's awesome. I love it. Steve, thanks again for coming on the podcast and sharing all this information.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everybody.